I'm Teresa Carraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. I'm broadcasting today from my colorful Appalachian childhood home, where I will have the pleasure next week of going on a hike with one of my viewers. Something she said was that my podcast meant a lot to her because it went so broad, covering a wide variety of topics, but also went so deep. Guy Duperel has recently talked about how he sees all of us curious ones as diving into different rabbit holes, our noses in the ground, our butts in the air, and occasionally brushing off the dirt with our paws to see another rabbit who is there diving into the same hole. This has been astonishing to me. I think that I do what James Corbett talked about recently as niche casting, something that is a neologism that he has coined to describe going deep into a specific topic, except I do that in a number of different rabbit holes, and I've been thrilled to find that there are people who are also interested in these same little niches. These same rabbit holes, like Neferhotep and Rhonda in deciphering the codes of the Bible and looking at the linguistics and going into, with Neferhotep, all of these esoteric, mystical texts. And then the world wars. I add on Julius Schoolafish and others who have really done the research on these things. Another lively niche dive has been the Robert Malone and controlled opposition rabbit warren. That has put me in a lot of good company. In this case, though, we are rabbits in pursuit of carrots. This episode is called Caretology, and that is what I look at as the solution at the end of my book, How to Dismantle an Empire. And these are carrots with the little sign that is above the 6 on the keyboard. That is what I call community credits, and replacing the generic globalized form of money that we have with something that is backed by local mortgages and is under the control of what I call commonwealths. And these are under 200,000 people. That is the whole focus of my book in terms of where do we go from here. I have been so fortunate to have Mark Alexander join me in that. He writes The Ministry of Truthiness. And not only has he read my book at least once and possibly more, but he also made the time to meet with me when he happened to be in my hometown. And we went quickly from the social on the first visit to gossiping about all of you on the second to really going into the nitty-gritty of how my system works. And now he has learned an entirely new programming language in order to program an app that would develop how it works, that would put how this process works into a way that is intuitive, that shows that there's power to this and it is doable. So I am so grateful to Mark to be in this rabbit hole with me, and I am going to hope to lure more of you to bury your noses in it and dive with us. My book, How to Dismantle an Empire, looks at the one system change that would be needed in order to take back our labor to serve families and communities rather than making the rich richer. In a recent discussion on power, Neferhotep quoted, "One shall rule behind and one shall govern in front." I am not at all concerned with the puppet governments. My concern is with the money system that empowers those who rule from behind. So I'm looking at how we can take back that power. The mortgage represents the transfer of legacy wealth from one generation to another. It is the inheritance. A home should incur a debt. a debt to make sure that the previous generation can live out their lives in comfort and security, and to pass on the gift in a better form to the next generation. What it shouldn't incur is a debt to the bankers who have done nothing to create that. They are usurping the inheritance because they assume ownership of all homes when they decide that they have the right to issue the credit against it. That means that with a few keystrokes, they create this credit that we then repay with 60 years of our labor with dual incomes. That means that that labor is taken away from families and communities who have created that wealth. So without fixing that, there is nothing that we can fix. So the bankers then are the rulers. Their one face is as bankers, and their other face is as corporations. Rhonda, our third paradigm niche expert on deciphering words, has realized that if you transpose the letters of corporation, you get crop ration. And it's not just the ration of the crop that we deserve in terms of wages, but it's also the ration of our crop, our harvest of labor that they take in terms of taxes, in terms of mortgages, in terms of debt repayments. That is all something that has been happening for millennia. So this is a way that we need to decipher and figure out what it is that we want. Most people, even of those who get this far, get stuck at the, well, how is this going to happen? They'll never let us take back the mortgages and rule ourselves. I think this is a stalling technique. It keeps someone in that helplessness of, well, there's nothing we can do about it. And they don't move from self-rule, which is an abstract concept, to the nitty-gritty of self-governance. When this does happen, how are you going to design it for your commonwealth? That's where the rubber meets the road and where you need to be thinking this through and testing it out. Here is the one system change that's needed to take back our labor. And all of this will be in text in the Substack version for easy reference, so I will read it to make sure I get this right. Only public banks owned by commonwealths under 200,000 people have the right to issue, tax, and set the exchange rate of credit used for internal exchange backed by the properties within its border. This is something I call carrots, that credit for internal exchange, and they also have the right to issue those carrots for the repayment of the debt, because all of that is internal and they are the only ones who have that prerogative. As I've talked about in other episodes, your Commonwealth Bank will be capitalized with the Social Security Trust Fund, and this will be recreated by issuing 3 $1 trillion coins, platinum coins, since the right of seigniorage is the only thing left to the federal government that doesn't go through the Federal Reserve. So then your Commonwealth will have its share of that credit, which will be then debt-free. In order to take this on, you have to take responsibility for Social Security, which means giving that trust fund capital a return that is going to keep it solvent for the indefinite future, and also making sure that you're taking in those payments that then can keep the pension plan always going. The carrot system is anarchy in motion, which is not blinded by science. And now I'm going to go over the 3 rules so that it cannot be corrupted, cannot be extracted, and cannot be used for private or preferential gain. Rule number 1, to protect against corruption and preferential treatment, all carrots must be distributed equally to all commoners, which are members of the Commonwealth. and you get to define that term. But what this means is they can't be used for salaries. They also can't be used in any way that is need-based, because if you start doing that, you're going to fall into a black hole that will suck them entirely out. This is an anarchist system in which people have the right to choose and they have the right to provide those services. So if you look at your commoners, including everyone who's born in your commonwealth, which has to be the case, and I would say anyone who's lived there for a certain period of time, depending on whether you want to encourage more people to be commoners or you want to discourage because you have too many people who are flocking in. This is something that I think is a very important way of distinguishing how you want to use these as subsidies. You can determine how they can be used, but you can't determine who they go to. Rule number 2, every caret exchange must include a 15% pension deduction for Social Security. Protecting Social Security is your sacred trust. That is what is enabling this system, and you need to make sure that it always is working. You can't end up giving out more benefits than you're taking in. So you need this to be a self-generating system. I'll include another video that I made on reinventing retirement that has some other ideas on how to do this. And rule number 3, caret distribution can't exceed the formula debt plus tax plus 2 times cash. And the reason for this is you never want to have more going out than you have coming in. If that happens and you need to reimburse people in order to have them cash out their carets for external purchases, you're either going to have to go into debt to those same bankers you've just extracted yourself from, or you're going to have to start selling off your assets. You do not want to do either of that. So be conservative. What debt means is a debt to yourself. So primarily this is mortgages because they're backed by the houses that are already there. This could also include student loans. And remember, this isn't a bad thing. The more debt you have to yourself, the more credit you can issue against it. So you're never going to have more debt than you can repay because you're in charge of issuing that credit. If you do that, though, there are some complicated things to think about, and I'll attach another episode on reinventing education so you can think about whether you want students to incur a debt before they start working or whether that should be just a lifetime endeavor. Your tax is going to come in because you can make your carets have an advantage by making them free of all income tax and sales tax, but not Social Security. If you do this, then when someone uses dollars for external purchases, you can up that tax and make it even so that you're paying twice as much as you would be paying for something that was local in carets. If you do that, then your dollar reserves, or whatever your imperial currency is, can be doubled in terms of the carets that you produce. Because if someone cashes them out, you're only going to give them half as much as you would need to otherwise. So that's a way that you can conserve your dollars and give local producers a 2-to-1 advantage. Within the parameter of those rules, though, there are many decisions that you need to make as czar of your fiefdom, and that's another episode I'll put in the Substack. The first question is, what will be the exchange rate of the imperial currency to your carets? So this is the opposite of when money is leaving. This is when money is coming in. In Santa Cruz, which has the highest cost of living compared to income in the country, I would set this at least at 2 to 1. So that means that when developers, students, tourists, or summer residents are looking to buy or rent housing, your local residents and the people who work there will have a 2 to 1 advantage. This will give them the ability to buy homes and also to rent. I would set long-term residents pretty high so that it doesn't include the students, maybe at 7 years. And if I was looking at Cumberland, where I am now, that has one of the lowest costs of living in the country, where it's too low and money trickles, money does not move fast enough, I think then I would set that lower so that we would be encouraging more people to bring money into Cumberland. Question 2, how will you tax carats and dollars? This is looking at that extraction. And in my fiefdom, I would make sure that any time that money is extracted, that it is worth half as much, that the combination of taxes adds up so that it does not have that same value. This is going to discourage outside ownership, like those developers, of housing, and also big corporations that are pulling money out of the community. Question 3, will you allow exchange of a certain amount of monthly dollars for tax-free carats? In my case, I would do this depending on the cost of living anywhere from, say, $3,000 to $6,000 a month, because that way you have people who are bringing money in from outside, who work for corporations and are going to be adding to the revenue and your dollar reserves, and it gives them a way of being able to pay for housing and not have the taxes on that, but be able to then be paying a high tax level for whatever is extracted. Question 4, will you cap the number of carats that someone can earn? This seems counterintuitive, but I would not have a minimum wage. I'd have a maximum wage. And the reason for this is that we compete against each other for housing based on how much debt we can assume. So the higher that you have that discrepancy, the more that you increase the amount that you have to earn. There's no reason for that. We can lower the cost of living, especially in places where it's already too high. So I think that I would set the maximum that someone could make as 60 carats an hour or 6,000 in a month, and then enable them to give additional amounts into their savings and also paying for things like their Social Security. So this way, there would be a limit to how much you needed to work, because there would be a limit to how much you could. Question 5, what interest rate will you charge for mortgages? Now remember, you've got this capital reserve, and the way banks work is that you can loan 10 times as much as what you have in capital, which also needs to be 10 times as much as you have in deposits. So you want to attract deposits, but you also have the ability to issue that debt really at whatever you want and be able to still get a good return. I would start out at a fixed rate of 3%. What that would do is attract all of the people to refinance their homes so that you move them from a dollar economy into a carat economy. And for 6 months, I would have that rate set. Then the fixed rate for new mortgages would go up to 3.1% for the next quarter, up to 3.2 for the next quarter, and so on until it reached 5% in 5 years. So that means that you are going to want to refinance that home early, but you also are going to have a gradual incline and know that once it reaches 5%, it's going to stay there. So you don't have any variable rate, which just creates havoc. Instead, you may have the ability to take out home equity loans at a lower rate, like 3 to 4%, so that then you can do home projects, but you know that everything is predictable. Question 6. What return will you give the Social Security Fund as interest? And that is something that you have a lot of leverage on, because if you have 3% loans, but you've loaned 10 times the amount of your capital, at the maximum potential, that's going to be a 30% annual return. What I would do is give it a 7% return, and that is always going to keep it solvent. It'll provide a cushion so that you know that you always have enough to cover Social Security, and you may not even need it because you're not going to need to keep up with inflation. Inflation is something that has been artificially produced because when banks issue the mortgage, they create the principal, but they don't create the interest to pay it back. So halfway through, the money in circulation runs out. That's why they have to use these variable rates and make sure that they are always churning it and doubling the cost of housing every 15 years at least in order to keep up with what they need to have coming back. You don't need to do that. In your case, it's possible the cost of housing will go down. Question 7. Will you offer interest on long-term savings? In my case, absolutely yes. I think I would give at least 2% to long-term savings because, for one thing, you want to have more deposits because your deposits are also going to put a cap on what you can issue in terms of loans. And also, you want to enable people to get out of gambling with their savings in the stock market or Bitcoin or whatever else it is. You want to give them a safe place where it is backed by your local mortgages. And this is going to enable people to be able to borrow from it, whether a down payment for a house, whether education or a car. You don't really care as long as you develop a system to make sure that this is something that is long-term and that people are taking that seriously and protecting themselves for retirement. You can give that incentive without needing to have penalties. And the last and most important question, what incentives will you give for people to use carrots for the things that you want to encourage? In my case, if I have, say, 500 carrots a month per person to distribute, I would do 100 carrots each in the areas of local food production, of well care, education, and home improvements. This would end up meaning if you have, say, 10,000 people in a village, 1 million carrots a month would go towards encouraging people to produce food. And this could be anyone doing anything. So there's so many different ways that someone would be able to make a living equal to the cost of housing. They could also be doing anything to help people feel better or to take care of children, to take care of the elderly. Anyone can teach and anyone can learn. So education is wide open. And home improvement and leaving the places that we are better than we found them is something that everyone can participate in. So it gives a lot of different options for people who want to be working for their community, and it will make us grateful to the people who are bringing money in from other places, so that then our system of rewards and dividends can become even more robust. For the remaining 100 carrots, I would put 40 carrots per person per month towards any project on your block. 30 for a project in your neighborhood, 20 for something in your hamlet, and then 10 for a project in your village. So in a block of, say, 30 people, that would be 1,200 carats a month. A neighborhood of 300 would be 9,000 carats a month. A hamlet of 3,000 people would be 60,000 carats a month. And then a village of 30,000 would be 300,000 carats a month. Imagine what you could do. So while we're diving into the rabbit holes of the corruption of the Dragon Court and the COVID con and the bull they want us to buy with the Bible, let's also dive down the rabbit hole of imagination, of the utopias that we want to create, the kind of community that we want to see. And to help you with that, here is Reinventing Education, and this is Reinventing Retirement. Thank you for watching.